Nothing worth having comes easy. Good day, dear students. Today's discussion is a continuation of our past discussion on remedial classroom. So again, one of the key concepts in organization and management is instruction, right? Definitely, instruction is the purposeful direction of learning process. Hence, one factor to make learning process effective is good instructional materials since it supports learning content and allows students to be engaged more in the teaching and learning process. So, I am your teacher, Riza May, and welcome to Instructional Materials. So, instructional materials are essential and significant tools needed for teaching and learning. As such, it promotes teachers' efficiency and improves students' performance since it stimulates and motivates students to learn, as I have mentioned earlier. So, before we proceed, these are the objectives of our session. At the end of the presentation, learners should be able to display understanding of the topics presented. Secondly, create an instructional material. And lastly, demonstrate and explain their own output creatively. Okay, so welcome again to instructional materials. So, indeed, the objectives will not be achieved without your attention and participation. Okay, future teachers, keep in mind that if you do not plan, the student will plan for you. So, to make our discussion interactive, I have a question to all of you. Would you mind to read it? Why is having an effective instructional material so important? Okay, so you might be answering the question. So I assume all your answers are expectedly accurate. Okay, so your answers are expected to be commented at the comments section. So I'll be reading it, okay, after our discussion. Instructional materials are tangible substances and real objects that provide the audio and or visual component necessary for learning. Many of them can be manipulated. Okay, so instructional materials also stimulate a learner's senses and may have the power to arouse emotions. Aside from that, instructional materials help the teacher make sense of abstractions and simplify complex messages. Okay, so what is instructional materials? Okay, so firstly, instructional materials are content of information conveyed within a course. Okay, it is also an alternative channels of communication. Next, it is an essential tool in learning every subject in the curriculum. Also, it These are resources and tools used as vehicles to help communicate the information. So to mention, it includes kits, textbooks, magazines, newspapers, or what we generally call as printed materials. We have also recorded videos like what I am doing right now and other audio visual type of instructional materials. So these are resources which can help students gain a deeper understanding of course materials and encourage critical thinking. It also allows the students to interact with words, symbols, and ideas in many ways that develop their abilities in reading, listening, solving, viewing, thinking, speaking, writing, and using media and technology. Always remember, class, that the more you plan, the more effective the lesson and delivery. So, the less problems with discipline. Okay? So, instructional materials add spice in the teaching and learning process. Therefore, if a teacher is specifically all of us innovates instructional materials, then we can easily catch the attention of learners to learn. Okay, so what are some of the purpose of instructional material? Okay, first one, okay, it is to help the educator deliver a message creatively and clearly. Aside from that, it is to assist learners in gaining and increasing awareness and skills, as well as retaining more effectively what they learn. For instance, if learners are curious about a certain place, but you cannot bring them there, then we can just simply show them a picture of it or tour them through a video, right? Okay. Next, it is to reinforce learning and potentially bring realism to the experience. Okay? Saving time and energy on the part of both the teacher and the learner. And lastly, it stimulates the learner's bodily senses. Okay? Help clarify abstract or complex concepts, and it adds variety to the teaching and learning experience. Since instructional materials serve as a supplement for the teacher's instruction. So as I have been mentioning, okay, so instructional materials are very purposeful in the teaching and learning process because it stimulates and motivates the learner's attention, okay, and learner's abilities, okay, to learn. Aside from the purpose of instructional materials, we have also the different guiding principles in making instructional materials. The instructional materials should reinforce and supplement, not substitute for, the educator's teaching efforts. You need to bear in mind, of course, that we teachers are still the best instructional material. Okay? And instructional materials should not substitute us teachers. Rather, it should only serve as a supplement of our discussion. Bear that in mind. Next one. Instructional aids should be appropriate for the physical considerations and the learning environment. So one good example of this is the new normal way of education. What is the best instructional material? Many of us will surely answer the use of technology as an aid. is really relevant, right? Next one, the message imparted by instructional materials must be accurate, valid, authoritative, up-to-date, state-of-the-art, appropriate, unbiased, and free of any unintended messages. Remember that we have diverse learners. Okay? Kaya nga may tinatawag tayong learners diversity. Okay? Magkakaiba. Okay? From the learning, syempre tayong teachers or tayong future teachers, we have our teaching strategy. So, students also have their own learning strategies. Therefore, instructional materials to be prepared must be equally done for all, regardless of their learning style. Okay, Next one is how to design instructional materials. So, I have researched here, the ADI process. ADI is a mnemonic device which stands for A. Analyze the needs of the learners. D. Design the learning objectives. D. Develop instructional materials and content. I. Implement the material by delivering training. And E. Evaluate the materials and delivery. Okay, so first and foremost, of course, we need to take a look into the needs of our learners. Just like in writing a story, okay, the writer must sense first the need of his or her readers, right? Or just like also the teacher, before making an instructional material or designing an instructional materials, he or she must first analyze the needs of his or her learners. Then after knowing the needs of the learners or identifying or analyzing the needs of the learners, then here goes the designing of the learning objectives. Okay, just like in writing a lesson plan, right? Set first your objectives para you have the path, you have the direction of, okay, or makukuha mo yung result or goal that you want. Okay, so after designing the learning objectives, then here comes now the developing of instructional materials and content. Okay, then after it, so implement the material by delivering training. So implementation na tayo. Okay, and then evaluate the materials and delivery. Okay, the question now is, why is there a need to evaluate the materials and delivery? Of course, 'di ba? Just like sa pagiging estudyante, evaluation ang pinakalas na sa process. Bakit? So that you have a basis next time kung na-try ko na itong instructional material na ito. So, medyo tagilid siya sa attention ng aking estudyante. So, you have the time to think of another way, okay, or another remedy na pwedeng magmamatch sa attention ng iyong learners. So, evaluation is a big factor in the making of your instructional materials. Okay, so that's ADI process. Always remember that when designing instructional materials. Next one, of course, after knowing Okay, the things on how to design properly your instructional materials, of course, you need to have an attractive instructional materials. It's not enough that you know about instructional materials. It is not enough that you have the idea, okay, of what are instructional materials. So in my own perspective, what is more important now is to know how to make an attractive instructional materials. Okay, parang tayo yung seller and our students are our customers. These are the things that we should look into when making an instructional materials. Firstly, it must be relevant, it must also be timely, and it must be attention grabber. So these things are needed in making an effective instructional materials. Remember that this era needs innovative way of learning. Since our learners are more advanced, and hindi lang sa learning, it needs also innovative way of teaching. So for example, this time of pandemic, teachers should show their versatility. Okay? Parang nung bata lang tayo yan, that nung gusto natin ng pagkain, we are more attracted to what our eye sees. Okay? Kung colorful yung pagkain, kung maganda yung style ng pagkain, we are more motivated to buy it, right? Ganun din sa teaching and learning process. If we have, okay, a very attractive instructional materials, then our learners will be more attracted also to learn. Okay? So, gaya nga ng sabi ni Mark Prensky, okay, our students have changed radically, and that today's students are no longer the people our educational system was designed to teach. Okay? So, it simply means that technology has really impacted almost every aspect of our life today, and education is no exemption. That's all for our discussion for today. Thank you, and I hope you have learned something today. Have you learned something today?